making our neighborhoods safer, and recognizing some outstanding men and women in District 1. I'm Councilman Dave Siebert. We'll talk about that next on The Issues. Welcome to On the Issues. I'm Phoenix City Councilman Dave Siebert. Although progress has been made in fighting violent crime, America still has a violent crime rate among the highest in the industrialized world. This is unacceptable. My guest today is here to talk about Project Safe Neighborhoods, a program about reclaiming our neighborhoods and streets and making America's communities safer. Please welcome Paul Charleton, U.S. Attorney with the District of Arizona. Paul, thanks for being here.
Thank you very much for having me.
Let's talk a little bit about Project Safe Neighborhoods and what it means to the country and specifically to the city of Phoenix.
Well, as you know, Project Safe Neighborhood is President Bush's plan to reduce violent crime by aggressively prosecuting those individuals who use weapons when they commit crimes.
And so these are crimes that have been on the books for years, and we're now going to get an opportunity to use the federal system to go after some people in certain violent circumstances.
Exactly. For the most part, the crimes that we'll be prosecuting are crimes that, as you say, have been around for a long time. But because of resource issues, because of funding issues, they haven't been as aggressively prosecuted as they will be now. President Bush and Attorney General John Ashcroft have dedicated a significant amount of money to making sure that we can now prosecute those crimes.
I can remember, but it was back, I think, in 1996. And we have what we call Operation Safe Streets, where every summer PD does a phenomenal job, and they go after gangs especially that are just a problem in our community. And in '96, they were doing a presentation showing of all the weapons they had taken off the street. And I happened to notice in their presentation there was a sawed-off shotgun and a sawed-off rifle. And of course I asked them, what are those? And they came back and said, it's a sawed-off rifle and it's a sawed-off shotgun. And I said, yeah, I can see that. But I think that's been a federal crime since 1934. And they said, yeah, it is, but it's hard to get cooperation. And so over the next few years, they had talked about getting the cooperation, and it improved, and we found out that it really hadn't improved that much. So Assistant City Manager Cheryl Scully and Chief Hurt and myself went to Washington, and this was long before this project, and it asked for something very similar to this. And they were very polite, but there just wasn't any resources, any money, or any help. And so here we had the city of Phoenix, who had adopted what we called Phoenix Exile. And we thought, boy, we're going to get some help, something's going to happen, and nothing did happen. And special thanks to you and to Attorney General John Ashcroft for helping getting us some funding to make something that's very similar to what we tried to do a reality, because guess what? Without the federal government's help, this whole process wouldn't happen. So let's talk specifically about the prosecutors. I mean, what we have is two prosecutors that, I don't know if we want to say donated, but two City of Phoenix prosecutors that have gone to your office to work for you to specifically go after gun crimes. And can you talk about taking a city prosecutor and turning them into a certified assistant U.S. attorney in your office?
Thanks to your leadership and to the City of Phoenix's willingness to look at this very progressively, we've been able to accept two very good city prosecutors at our office. And when they began at our office, we provided them with training at our National Advocacy Center in Columbia, South Carolina, where all federal prosecutors go to learn how it is they prosecute a federal case. Now, these two prosecutors that came from the City of Phoenix were already very good prosecutors, people with excellent judgment. But there is something different about prosecuting a federal crime, and there is something different in particular about prosecuting a federal gun case. So they received the kind of training that they needed to make sure that they were doing an adequate job in our office and representing the City of Phoenix well. Additionally, those two individuals in our office now are prosecuting cases that might not otherwise have had an opportunity to go to the federal system. These are individuals who use a weapon in a crime of violence, or individuals who are not allowed to possess a weapon, a felon, for example, or an individual who's unlawfully in the United States. Now we have the resources in the form of 2 prosecutors from the city of Phoenix who are assisting us in prosecuting those kinds of individuals and removing them from society and putting them in a place where they won't do anyone else any more harm.
Yeah, and I have a tendency of calling that place federal prison. I call it Club Fed. And so what you're saying is we can send this bad guy, if they're convicted of a federal crime, to federal prison, Club Fed, and if they're a member of a gang, we can send them to this location somewhere out of the state to help break up the structure of the gang.
Precisely, and I've heard that term before, Club Fed, but I can tell you it's a place that neither of us would want to spend any amount of time at all. And we do remove those individuals who have a concern for us about remaining here in this state. And if they're tied to a group, an organization, a specific threat group that we think could cause us problems if they were to remain here in the state, we will move them out of the state to a faraway location, to a federal prison outside of the state so that they won't be able to communicate with those individuals who could still do us harm. And you're exactly right. That kind of removal, that kind of taking away from a group or an organization like that has a terrific impact on that group.
Which we can't do on a local level. I mean, it takes the power of the federal government to make that happen.
And working with local officials and local law enforcement, that's what's so wonderful about this program, that we have city prosecutors, we have city law enforcement officers, both from Phoenix, who are assisting us in federal prosecutions to reduce crime locally and to deter crime in the future by removing these people from our local area.
And some of these crimes, they could be a crime not only in state law, but they can be a crime in federal law. But in many cases, the federal law may have a much stiffer penalty. So for the people who are going to commit a gun crime in Phoenix, and if they're targeted under this program, they can expect to be out of action for quite some time.
It's true, we have very stiff penalties for individuals who use a weapon during a crime of violence. And one of the other nice attributes of this program is that we work very closely with the local county attorney, Rick Romley, and with the city prosecutors through the prosecutors who are in our office, so that we can make a determination when a crime occurs. Where is it that we will get the best bang for our buck? Where is our best law enforcement dollar going to go? If we prosecute this locally, will this individual see more time? Or if we prosecute this individual federally, will he see more time there? That is a terrific way to do law enforcement. It's a great investment for the local taxpayers as well, because they know that using the same resources, local law enforcement, local prosecutors, that those people are either going to go to a state prison or a federal prison, but either way, it's going to be the best place for the local citizens, the law-abiding folks here in our community.
Right. Let's talk a little bit about some examples of people that would fall under this category that you would want to go after federally. Let's take, for example, we've had incidences in Phoenix where we have home invasions, and the person may be here illegally, and they have a firearm. They go in and do the home invasion. They intimidate the people in there. They threaten to kill them. And so that once they're caught with the firearm, if, let's say, local law enforcement has a hard time finding witnesses later because they fear for their life, they won't come back or they won't testify, you could go after them with the gun crime without having any of the witnesses, because the officer caught the person with the weapon in their possession. Would that be an example of one of the ways you can go after them?
It's a very good example, because just as you said, not only are there problems with proof and finding witnesses who will come forward to testify about a crime of violence such as that one, and perhaps fear for good reason for coming forward, but those cases can sometimes become long-term investigations, expensive investigations, one in which the resources of law enforcement will have to be dedicated over a long period of time. But if instead of looking at that case as a problem of proof or as a problem of dedicating sufficient resources, you can find a fairly simple case to prove: an unlawful possessor of a weapon, an individual who's unlawfully in the United States who's in possession of a weapon, it's much easier to seek and obtain the conviction of that individual than it would be to go the other direction. And again, you're getting a good investment for your law enforcement dollar when you go that way.
This sounds like it's very similar to the federal government's approach to Al Capone back in the 30s. You know, went after him for tax evasion, as I recall, and they used the big stick of the federal government to go after him. He had done all these awful, terrible things in Chicago and other places, and yet he was convicted on tax evasion, and certainly ended his career as one of the most notorious criminals in the history of the United States.
Well, precisely, and when you were thinking about this issue years ago before Project Safe Neighborhood came to be, that's exactly the route that we should have been thinking about this issue. And that's the very reason, because there are other ways to attack these problems. When we see an individual who's running booze during the Prohibition era, we begin to think that that's the kind of crime he should be prosecuted for. Instead, there may be an easier way to prove the case by going after this individual for having failed to pay his taxes. Same applies in this situation. As you pointed out, if there's a home invasion robbery and the individual can be prosecuted in a different way, perhaps something different than the home invasion robbery, then it's a good use of our resources. We know that this is a violent individual. We know this is an individual who shouldn't be living with us in society for a period of time. Let's find the best way to remove him and take care of that problem.
Let's take another example. Let's take a notorious gang, and members of this gang have been already convicted felons, in some cases many times over, and they're caught in possession of a firearm. Is that another example where it would certainly get the prosecution from the federal program?
It's a very good example, because we often track these individuals through the groups that they belong to. So if we know, for example, that there's a gang here in Phoenix that's committing certain crimes in an area of town that we're concerned about, we can begin to look at those individuals, realizing that it may be difficult to prove that the organization itself is involved in committing these crimes, but our understanding is that they are in fact affecting the local community, intimidating the local community, breaking into homes in that area. We can begin to look at those individuals, determine whether or not they are lawful or unlawful possessors of weapons, and attack the problem from that angle. Again, these are laws that have been on the book for a long time. It's for many, many years been unlawful for convicted felons to possess weapons. We know there's a gang problem, we know many of them are convicted felons, and we know most of them will carry weapons. So we attack it from that angle, and again, we get a terrific return on our law enforcement investment that way.
And it can also be not only just prohibited possessors, but it could be illegal weapons, illegal machine guns, sawed-off shotguns, sawed-off rifles, things that have been illegal since 1934, and you can use the same process for prosecuting those people.
Well, it's the example you used earlier, when those individuals showed you the sawed-off shotgun or the sawed-off rifle. Those are weapons that could have been and probably should have been prosecuted federally. We'll do the same thing now with the funding that we have, with the dedicated resources from the City of Phoenix, and those individuals will rightfully be removed from society for a period of time.
Boy, I tell you what, that's wonderful, and I think what we need to do now is get the message out to the criminal element. You're going to do a crime with a gun, you may face the big stick of the federal government, just like Al Capone did.
That's exactly right. There's a deterrent effect to prosecuting these cases. Word of mouth is certainly effective throughout that criminal element, but there's a public service, just as the one you're doing right now, in which we can try to get the word out to individuals in the community that we are going to, hand in hand with local government, prosecute these cases aggressively.
Great, that's wonderful. Paul, I really appreciate all the work you did, because I tell you what, if you hadn't been there to really give us the boost we needed, give us the resources, and take our prosecutors, give them the training, and help put this together, we would still be in the position we were a few years ago, where we had the desire to do something, we just didn't have the help. And if you could give the special thanks to John Ashcroft from the City of Phoenix, I'd really appreciate it.
I'll take that message back. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul.